guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series. We're almost to the end of Buxton Peak Book 2, Center Stage, and starting into chapter 13. This is called Baby Blues. Kai, Rhonda's insistent whisper woke him up. Something's wrong. What is it? Kai reached over and turned on the light. His blurry eyes caught the movement of Rhonda's shaky hand as she pulled back the sheets. Blood! Kai jumped out of bed, his stomach reeling. I'm in a lot of pain, Rhonda gasped, her body curled up and her arms wrapped around her belly. Call for an ambulance and go get Megan. Kai grabbed his cell phone and dialed as he ran down the hall and out the back door to the shared patio deck. He pounded on Ian and Megan's back door as a lady's voice came on the line. 911, what is your emergency? The operator asked. Just then, Ian pulled the back door open and Kai practically shouted at both of them. We need an ambulance. She's bleeding everywhere. Ian ran to his bedroom and came back with Megan, who was pulling on a robe as she ran down the hall. What happened? Megan asked as they rushed back over towards Rhonda's room. Address? Kai looked around as if he could glean that information from the cool night air. What's our address? They want to know our address. His voice squeaked as he choked out the words. Megan grabbed the phone from him and spoke more calmly to the operator, giving her the address. I'm almost at her side now. Megan put the phone on speaker and knelt down next to Rhonda's bed. Okay, I'm with Rhonda. Rhonda, the operator said, we have an ambulance on the way. Sorry. I have an ambulance on the way. I need you to answer a couple of questions, okay? Can you do that? I'll try. Her voice was quiet, too quiet. Kai climbed back onto the bed, disregarding the sheets covered in blood, and reached for Rhonda's hand. How far along are you in your pregnancy? The voice from the phone asked. 29 weeks, Rhonda whispered. Where is the pain? Everywhere. It's like horrible cramps, but more intense. Rhonda was doubled over and moaning. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no pain at all, and 10 being the worst pain you've ever had, where are you? Rhonda gasped for breath, unable to answer. Kai replied, I think that's a 10. The pain subsided long enough for Rhonda to answer. This is the worst pain I've ever experienced. Kai held a firm hand on her shoulder. He looked up toward Ian. Come on, pal, let's get you dressed. Realizing he was only wearing boxer shorts, he reluctantly let go of Rhonda's hand and pushed himself up from the bed. You get a shower, Ian said. I'll go wait for the ambulance. Ian left Kai in the bathroom and shut the door behind him. Shower? Kai whispered. His eyes caught the reflection in the full-length mirror in his bathroom. He was covered in blood, Rhonda's blood. His stomach retched and he barely made it to the toilet before he was sick. When he could finally stand, he stumbled into the shower and turned on the scalding water, not even caring that he was still wearing his boxers. He leaned against the tile as the water poured down his body. He opened his eyes only once, and when he saw the blood-stained water on the bottom of the shower, he felt his stomach lurch again, and he closed his eyes quickly. Kai somehow found the strength to finish his shower and get dressed. When he opened the bathroom door, he heard Ian leading the EMTs into Rhonda. He peeked around the corner at their bed and breathed a sigh of relief that Megan had pulled the blankets over Rhonda, covering up most of the blood. Kai crept back over to hold Rhonda's hand as the medical technicians began the examination of her frail body. Her skin was pale and her eyes peered up at him as if pleading for him to make the pain go away. We need to take you to the hospital, one of the EMTs said. Rhonda gave a small nod, then her eyes met Kai's. For a fraction of a moment, everything around them faded away. It was just them, no worries or cares. But the moment ended all too soon when they lifted Rhonda's body onto the stretcher. Her hand slipped out of his as they began to wheel her away. Megan came over and gathered Kai into her arms, and he clung to her like she was his mom and he was a frightened little boy. Tears ran down his cheeks as he watched the men maneuvering the stretcher over the threshold and into the darkness. He released Megan and followed as they wheeled Rhonda out to the ambulance. Which one of you is riding along? One of the EMTs turned and looked at the three of them standing there. Kai, Megan, and Ian all looked at one another. I can't do this. Kai shook his head. He knew he should go with Rhonda, but he was still freaking out. He started to shake, and as he backed up a step, he ran into Ian. Kai, you have to go with her, Megan said. That's your baby in there. She grabbed Kai's hands and pulled him forward, even as Ian pushed him gently from behind. Rhonda needs you, pal, Ian whispered. Come on. What am I supposed to do? Kai tried to turn around and shuffle back into the house. I'm going to be more harm than good. Megan should go. All Rhonda needs is for you to hold her hand. Look her in the eye and tell her it's going to be okay. Megan continued pulling him gently. But it's not okay. Kai pulled his arm free and waved in the direction of their bedroom. You saw all the blood. There's so much blood. That's not normal. That's exactly why we need to hurry and get her to the hospital, Ian said. Now let's go. Ian and Megan practically lifted Kai up the steps and into the ambulance. Kai turned around before they shut the doors and looked right at Ian. You're coming too, right? You'll meet me there? We'll be right behind you, pal. Ian nodded his head. We'll meet you at the hospital. Kai sat down and tried to stay out of the way. He answered the EMT's questions as best he could, but otherwise felt helpless. He didn't have his wallet or his phone, so he couldn't call Rhonda's parents or check to see that Ian was on his way. Mercifully, it was only about a 10-minute ride to the hospital, and with the lights and sirens, they got there even faster. Kai had only been in the emergency room once when he'd broken his arm as a kid, and that was in through a front door with a long wait and a holding room full of scary, coughing, puking people. This was different. The ambulance pulled up to a door in the back of the emergency area, which opened right up for them. There was no paperwork or triage. They pulled Rhonda quickly into a trauma room. They had stopped asking him questions, and Kai found himself on the outside of a closed curtain. A nurse pushed through with a portable machine, and within minutes Kai heard the words placenta abruption from someone on the other side of the curtain. He knew very little about babies, but that sounded serious and frightening. Kai grasped his hair and paced in front of the curtain, wanting to rip his way in and demand to see Rhonda. He almost kicked a chair that sat against the wall, but instead he sat down hard and threw himself forward, elbows on his knees, hands gripping the sides of his head. Are you Kai Burton? A woman asked. When Kai raised his head expectantly, the lady took that as a yes and continued. There's a young couple in the waiting room asking for you. Oh, thank goodness. Kai hopped up and followed the lady. How's Rhonda? Megan asked as soon as Kai came through the door. What's happening? They won't let us back there. They won't let me be with her right now either. Kai pushed past Megan and Ian, flopped onto a nearby chair, and put his head in his hands once more. They're working on her, and I heard someone say she had a placenta abruption. I don't know what that means, but it sounds serious. Did you call her mom yet? Megan asked. No, I didn't think to grab my phone. Oh, here, I still have it. Megan reached into her purse. Call Rhonda's mom. The hospital personnel will be much more responsive to her mom than a frantic boyfriend and a couple of neighbors, okay? Okay. Kai breathed a little slower and fumbled with his cell phone. Kai. Megan put her hand on Kai's shoulder, and Kai looked up as if being startled. My guess is they're going to be delivering the baby tonight, or very soon. You have got to calm down, and no matter what happens, you can't freak out, okay? Okay. Kai nodded his head, but he wasn't entirely sure he wouldn't panic. He dialed Rhonda's mom's number and waited until a very sleepy voice answered. He looked up at the clock on the wall and realized it was 3 a.m. He could hear the shakiness in his own breath. Sue? Rhonda's in the hospital. What? Sue sounded a little more awake. Is she okay? What happened? She's probably going to have the baby tonight. Kai felt his throat tighten, and he couldn't finish his sentence. He turned his head toward Megan, who was now sitting beside him, and shoved the phone into her hand. Sue, it's Megan. She shifted just slightly in her chair and pushed her long hair off her shoulder to better hold the phone. We're here with Kai and waiting for more information. Kai overheard someone in the emergency room say something about a placenta abruption, which I'm assuming is a detached placenta. Kai stiffened his back, and Megan put her hand on his knee, forcing him to stay put. He waited as Megan listened to Rhonda's mom and creased her brows. Finally, she looked up at him. Sue wants to know if they're going to transport Rhonda somewhere else. She doesn't want to drive all the way up here if they're bringing her down to Lansing. She'll just meet us there. I don't know, Kai whispered. He felt so helpless. His shoulders slumped and his hands balled into fists. Ian sat opposite Megan and put his hand on Kai's shoulder. He was grateful for his best friend. They listened as Megan spoke with Sue. I'm sure the doctor will come talk to us in a little while, and as soon as we know more, we'll call you back, okay? Megan said. For now, just be ready to walk out the door, and please, pray for Rhonda and the baby. She assured Rhonda's mom that she would be there for Rhonda, hung up the phone, and handed it back to Kai. After what felt like hours, but in reality was only a few minutes, the lady at the reception desk called them back into a triage room. Ian helped Kai to his feet and walked side by side as brothers. I'm scared, Kai whispered. It's going to be all right, pal. As they got settled, a doctor joined them. He looked tired and frustrated, but hopeful. I'm Dr. Brennan, he said. Rhonda has authorized me to talk to all three of you, but I want to know which of you is the baby's father. He looked at Kai and then Ian with piercing eyes. Kai took a deep breath, afraid of what the doctor was going to tell them, but looked him in the eye and took responsibility for Rhonda and the baby. I need to know what kind of drugs she was taking in her early pregnancy. The doctor was blunt. Kai shook his head. None of us really know. I'm not sure even Gary knew what he gave her, but I suspect it was marijuana laced with cocaine. Okay, Dr. Brennan sighed. We'll be able to do a full analysis of the amniotic fluid and a blood workup once the baby's born. For now, we're getting Rhonda prepped for emergency surgery and we'll be delivering the baby cesarean. The placenta has partially detached, which could be a direct result of her having taken drugs in the early months of her pregnancy. There are other explanations, but that is my suspicion. The baby is not getting enough oxygen right now, and he will need to be delivered immediately. Excuse me, says we. The baby is not getting enough oxygen right now and will need to be delivered immediately. Can't use the word he because the doctor has no idea whether the baby is a boy or a girl at that point, so it's not written in the book. Okay. The neonatal intensive care unit transport team is on their way up from Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, and they will be taking the baby back with them. That will give the baby the best chance of survival. Rhonda will stay here in the hospital for several days after the surgery, and afterwards she can go to Lansing to visit the baby. We'll deal with that later. For now, we need to get that baby out safely and get Rhonda's bleeding stopped. Dr. Brennan looked toward Kai. I'm going to allow Dad to come back and say hello, but I'll warn you, she's not in good shape. Whatever prayers you got in you, now would be a good time for them. With that, Dr. Brennan got up and held the door for Kai to follow. Kai felt like he was in a daze as he followed the doctor down a short hallway and back into the trauma room. Nurses were coming and going, and there were too many tubes and beeping monitors and gowns and blood. Kai forced himself to hold it together for Rhonda's sake. He hadn't understood half of what the doctor had told him, but decided to ask Megan for clarification later. For now, he realized that whatever was happening was serious enough to be life-threatening to Rhonda and their baby boy. Rhonda was on her side and looked pale and frightened. Kai pulled up a little chair and put his face close to hers to help her see him without having to lift her head. She tried to smile but didn't seem to have enough energy. Hi, her whisper was barely audible. Don't try to talk, love, Kai whispered back. The doctors and nurses are going to take good care of you, and when you wake up, I'll be waiting for you, okay? You don't have to worry about a thing except getting better. Will you promise to rest and not worry? Okay, she trembled. I promise. I love you, Kai assured her. I always have and I always will. I love you too. Her eyes closed and she began breathing more softly. He kissed her forehead. Kai felt Rhonda's fingers relax and knew she was asleep. Feeling as though he was now just in the way, he reluctantly let go of her fingers, turned and walked back to the waiting room. Mr. Burton? A calm voice of one of the nurses stopped him. We'll give you a minute with your family before taking you to get prepped for the delivery. It took Kai a few seconds to realize she was talking to him. He was Mr. Burton, a grown man who was about to become a father, and Ian and Megan were the only family he had this side of the Atlantic Ocean. But prepped? For what? What do you mean, prepped? He felt a lump in his throat and gulped it down. To go into the delivery room, the nurse said. To watch your baby be delivered. I get to be there? Fear mixed with panic, mixed with excitement, mixed with a slight case of nausea overwhelmed Kai, and he felt his face heat up. His hands began to shake. My baby? Of course. Come on, follow me. The nurse chuckled and smiled, shook her head, and patted him on the shoulder. You'll be fine. You're going to be a dad today. Today was the day Kai had to grow up. It frightened him, but he stood up straight and nodded his head and waited for the nurse to lead the way. They stopped at the waiting room to gather Ian and Megan, walked down several hallways and through a couple of doors until they reached an elevator. Kai felt lost, literally and figuratively. The movement of the elevator didn't help. The obstetrics ward was on the 3rd floor, and the nurse showed them to another waiting room. Because it was still dark out, there were no other people there. No routine surgeries were scheduled in the middle of the night. Rhonda's surgery was far from routine. "Will you call Rhonda's mom again?" Kai asked Megan. "She should probably stay in Lansing so she can visit the baby at Sparrow. And I can stay here with Rhonda. I hope that's okay." "Of course," Megan said, taking the phone from Kai. "I'm sure she'll be fine with that. Ian, will you call my mom and dad and try to explain it? They'll want to know their grandson is about to be born." Kai felt lost and broken. "I still don't understand most of what's going on." "It's too soon," Ian said. "Can babies even live if they are born this early?" "Yes, of course they can," Megan answered Ian's question, but looked directly at Kai. "I have a friend whose baby was born 8 weeks early and is now a healthy teenager. She was 1 pound 11 ounces. That's tiny, and she pulled through. Baby Sean is only 7 weeks early. That NICU team is going to take such good care of your baby, I promise." Kai just nodded his head and bit his lower lip to keep it from shaking. He put his arms around Ian, then reached over for Megan and pulled her into the hug as well. He almost asked them to pray for him, but remembered he didn't believe in God. Some days he wished he did. He pulled them close one last time before releasing them and dropping his arms. Kai looked Ian in the eye, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. With a deep breath, Kai turned and followed the nurse down the hall. "It's so cold in here." Kai wrapped his arms around himself, trying not to shiver. The thin scrubs they made him change into did little to ward off the chill. "Don't worry," the nurse said. "Rhonda has lots of blankets draped over her. She'll be fine." What about me? Kai thought. He stood near a corner, feeling very helpless. It wasn't like Rhonda was awake so he could coach her through contractions. He just stood there, smelling the sterile room, goosebumps rising on his bare arms, his stomach tight, his heart pounding. The nurses and doctors rushing around didn't interact with him at all. If anything, they brushed him further into the corner to get him out of their way. Kai felt like he was taking part in the filming of a television series where the setting was a hospital emergency room. He half wondered where the cameras were hiding. He'd never been camera shy before, but that was always with a guitar in his hands. This was different. He didn't want anyone to capture the haunted look in his eyes, the crease in his brow, the pursed lips. He wanted out of here. His thoughts were interrupted when the anesthesiologist pulled a chair up next to Rhonda's head and invited Kai to sit down. The young doctor sat opposite him and continuously monitored the medicines and Rhonda's vital signs. Why are Rhonda's arms strapped to the table? They were straight across like a cross. What if she needs to itch her nose or something? She's not going to be awake, Mr. Burton. That's my job. The anesthesiologist pushed his glasses up and peered across Rhonda's head. If I need to get more medicine into her quickly, this is the easiest way. Suddenly, Kai was assaulted by the smell of burning flesh. What are they doing to her? He stood up and peered over the divider curtain. He watched as a doctor used the laser to cut through layers of fat. He didn't think Rhonda had an ounce of fat on her, but there was the proof. Oh my gosh, can skin stretch that far? When Kai saw how much blood was there, he sat down hard. Whoa, Kai said. He felt lightheaded and stared back at the anesthesiologist. He hoped he wouldn't pass out or throw up. Almost as soon as the delivery had begun, a tiny baby was in the hands of the doctor, who barely did an assessment before speaking softly. It's a boy. Sean, Kai whispered. His lips quaked and his voice caught in his throat. He'd never seen anything more beautiful and terrifying in his life. Skilled hands cradled baby Sean as the doctor cut the umbilical cord. Then Sean was carried over to another station and the transport team from the NICU worked their magic. A tiny oxygen mask was placed over Sean's face, and they readied a tube to be pushed gently down his throat. Another tube was inserted into Sean's belly button, which still protruded with a piece of the umbilical cord. "Apgar's score of 2, a nurse called out. "What the heck does that mean?" Sean's skin was gray. He barely looked alive. Kai felt his chest tightening. The transport team began gathering their things and wheeling Sean toward the door. "Wait," Kai said. "Where are you taking Sean? Don't I get to hold him? Give him a bottle? Anything?" A nurse turned to him with sympathetic eyes. "I'm sorry," the nurse said. "We'll be transporting him down to Sparrow Regional Neonatal Intensive Care Unit in Lansing. The transport team will keep the baby alive during the hour-long ride. He'll need a more permanent intravenous line and medications to stabilize him." Kai watched as they pushed his son out of the room. Before she left, the nurse turned back to Kai and put her hand on his arm. "We're going to take good care of baby Sean," she whispered. "I promise." "She's crashing," a doctor called. Kai whipped his head around as the chaos of people swarming around the operating table. "Hang some O-negative and get this bleeder stopped." Kai took a step toward Rhonda and bumped into a tray, knocking it over and causing tools to fly all over the floor. He tried to get out of the way, but stepped on a plastic tool, crushing it under his foot and knocking over a person trying to clean up the mess. "Get the dad out of here," someone yelled. Kai felt arms pulling him out of the room and into the hallway. He tried to twist out of their grip in an attempt to get back to Rhonda, but he was shoved out the door of the operating room and into an empty, bleak hallway. That is where he collapsed to his knees, racked with heartache, sobbing as he gripped his hair on both sides of his head. "Rhonda," he cried. Okay, that is the end of chapter 13. And I hope that you liked this chapter, and I hope that you will give it a thumbs up and like the video and share it on social media. And with our next chapter, we will get to chapter 14, which is actually the last chapter in the book, and it is called "There May Still Be Hope." So hope you'll stick around for that video as well.